Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
And welcome to GammaCast. I'm your host, Charlie the Professor Esser. And with me as always is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey Mozz, so glad to have you back once again for tonight's episode of Homecoming. The Incredible Hulk, Season 3, Episode 8, first air date November 30th, 1979. A very special episode of The Incredible Hulk. David finds himself traveling home to Trevorton, Grail Valley, for Thanksgiving, where his sister, who is also a scientist, asks him to help find a way to save the family farm from being sold to a land developer. Written by Andrew Schneider, directed by John McPherson. Okay, with the very special guest star, Diana Muldaur, as Helen Banner, sister to David Banner. Eagle-eyed viewers will know Diana Muldaur from other 80s classics like Star Trek The Next Generation, where she played Dr. Pulaski, who of course came in, I believe, in the second season of Star Trek The Next Generation, replacing Beverly Crusher. She was also at that time in Law and Order, L.A. Law, not Law and Order, L.A. Law, where she played Rosalind Shays, and she did a long run on that series as well, and sadly got written out of both series at the same time, because on both series they said, well, she'll be okay, she's got that other series she's in. So yeah, I learned that when I went to a Star Trek convention once, and they were discussing how really bad they felt about writing her out of both L.A. Law and Star Trek. But basically they were like, oh no, she's fine, she's got that other series she's in. And then like at the same time that one series went out, she got written out of the other one. So anyway, but that was her. But she did okay. She wound up on Batman the Animated Series a short time after that as Dr. Leslie Tompkins. For those of you who don't know, Dr. Leslie Tompkins is a love interest of Bruce in the Batman series, and on the current Gotham series, which if you're not watching, you should be, and you should be listening to the Before the Bat podcast with Philip Parrish, one of my other podcast partners.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, you got to. Leslie Tompkins, or Lee Tompkins, as they call her, is of course a love interest for Gordon there. They do mess with the timeline a bit. So getting back to the story, this was a good story. This was a nice world-building backstory for David. What did you think about it, Phil?
I enjoyed it thoroughly. I mean, because with superheroes, a lot of their past and their relationship to it is always a mystery, and there's always room for debate and whatnot. But for this, we're sort of given a unique opportunity to really see him confront his past, and not just as a metaphor, but in real life. So I thought it was really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it is, it's interesting because, of course, since this aired, you do get a lot of, there's been a lot of Hulk history given. Although part of it, actually what's kind of fascinating to me, just is because in reading other stories that have come out recently, this story actually meets very similarly to the Doctor Strange backstory that has been written for him in recent years since this. But now, of course, we don't get any implication here that David's father was in any way abusive, although that became a central part of the Hulk's backstory. But we do see that there is a lot of ill will between them. That there is a lot of negative feelings about, the farming life. And it is an interesting, it's very, I don't know about you, Mozz, but my family always encouraged my dreams. Mostly because, I had a brother who was a crack addict. And if you do have a brother who's a crack addict, I will tell you. Yeah, well, I'll tell you something though. Anything else any kid does is pretty much cool by your parents. It is a good upside to that.
So you got a hall pass.
Oh yeah, really. It's like you want to drop out of college, move to New York City, become a stand-up comedian? Are you smoking crack? No? Good for you. Follow those dreams, son. Yeah. So, but in this case, David does not have that much of an endorsement from his father. His father very much wants him to take over the family farm, to be a farmer. And David's like, I am a super genius, don't know if you knew that, and want to do science stuff. So, crops is good, but not what I want to do with my life. And his dad's like, oh, but it's a family thing. He's like, well, sorry. Maybe if Mom had lived, she could have bore you another son. Because that becomes to be what the real crux of the biscuit is that David's mother is dead, because that is in classic storyline. In our modern story, and this, it goes into this too, is this idea that that a big portion of David's rage in the modern stories comes from the fact that David's father killed his mother. Now, in this situation, yes, in our modern stories, that is very much part of that. And that actually was even dealt with in the Ang Lee Hulk, which, although not officially canon... Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you something. If you ever want to go see a very interesting take on the Hulk, do see Ang Lee's Hulk. It got panned by the critics, but it's actually a pretty good Hulk take.
Honestly, I liked it a lot better than the two subsequent Hulk movies. I thought they were really cartoonish, and there was a real humanity to the Hulk in that first film. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that Ang Lee's thing about the Hulk is Ang Lee really loved the visuals of comic books. And he thought that is such a great way to frame shots, because everything in a comic book, you always have a framed shot. So you always have a wall. You'll actually be able to see a frame in each shot, almost always. And so every shot he did, he set up these very meticulous things. Now, he did certain things with some CGI and some mats that did not play well, and people tore him apart for that. But really, almost everything in it is actually very canon. The only thing he really did that was kind of outside of the canon was that he had the Hulk grow very big, like almost becoming a gaiju, becoming a giant monster rather than just being a big guy, which took me out of it a bit. But aside from that, it was actually pretty good. And honestly, I still say that Ang Lee's Hulk was a pretty good Hulk, but that's me.
I thought so too. And as far as the graphics are concerned, there's this video on YouTube comparing graphics of the 2000s or the 90s to the graphics of we get in movies today, and and they shine that movie out as an example of when it works. And it was because they simply CGI'd the Hulk onto a real background, which made it look so much more real. But today's movies, they're making entire cities and buildings in the computer, so there's a certain level of reality that's lost there.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there are opinions both ways on that.
For sure.
But of course, we're not talking about that film today. We're talking about when you did when you wanted a Hulk, you got the biggest guy you could find, a Lou Ferrigno, if you will, and painted him green. And this is actually, I'll say this, the Hulk doesn't get to do that much in this film, in this episode.
Right.
But he gets some moments. He
does indeed.
He gets some good scenes. I mean, I always say Lou Ferrigno's a much better actor than people give him credit for. People get caught up in him talking, but it's like Vin Diesel and Groot. You can do a lot without saying much. And I do think that, Lou Ferrigno is a guy who can do that. And he gets some good scenes here where he gets to emote as the Hulk.
Which was crazy.
Yeah, and he, because of course, and this is, but of course, this is one of these things, the inconsistency of what causes a Hulk out, and what we actually really kind of get in this, that I think is kind of the most interesting thing. what really triggers a Hulk out seems to be emotional pain. Like something very deep inside him. Because I was thinking about that the other day when I was watching, because I was doing the live tweet, and it was the slam. And I'm it's saying, being chased by dogs, being, hounded by, being, tormented by the other person, isn't this angering or outrageous yet? But it strikes me in watching this episode that, it's not so much just the stress or even the, the adrenaline or anything like that, although we have seen him trigger himself with just a massive spike of adrenaline. There does seem to be that emotional connection, which is why he does have these dreams that lead to Hulkouts, and that we've seen this several times where there's someone in his dream. And in fact, when we open up, I think he's wearing a lei in his dream, which is a throwback to the start of the second season and Marriage, and where he met this woman who was very much, another scientist who was kind of the love, his second love of his life. Well, David goes through these women pretty quickly, It was
the 70s.
Yeah, it was. It was the 70s, man. You gotta. And David, he's a handsome drifter with good hair. Let's be honest here. He was a guy who could come into your world and, take some pictures of the bridges of Madison County. Anyway, but there is no love affair here because, of course, the main female in this is his sister.
Right.
Which I did find also fascinating that she, too, was a scientist. She was a entomologist, a bug scientist, which, and given what we see at DW Banner, we got to think that their mom must have been really brilliant.
Right.
And of course, what we find out is that there's this developer who's trying to convince all the farmers to sell so he can buy the land to build a model city because he wants progress,
probably control.
Well, yeah. Well, progress is control if you're a sociopath. And although I'll give him this much, for everything else, he doesn't immediately go to the "Have you tried killing them yet?" Business model. Now he does have to resort to that.
That's interesting.
Because everything else gets to there, but he, when he's starting out, he's trying really hard not to have to murder anyone.
Right.
But what we have found out is that there is this certain beetle that has been tearing through the crops. And the beetles are harmless. It's their larva that is the problem. And these bugs are particularly resistant to pesticides. Yeah. And so every pesticide they use, the bugs aren't dying. And Helen Banner, David's sister, when she shows up, says, look, we've had all the entomologists look at this. We've had everyone that knows about this. We need someone who can look at this in a completely new way, a different kind of scientist like you. And that talks him into staying. It was kind of an interesting thing there because, it was very clear that Banner wanted to go there. Because, of course, this opens up with Banner. He's in Colorado, and he just happens to see on the news, he sees his sister. And he realizes how much he misses his family. He even admits it to her. It's like, I just couldn't spend another Thanksgiving alone. Like, as a drifter, the whole point is not having anywhere to go back to, not have that sort of attachment. Yeah. But he ends up in the same town where he grew up. So he was looking for a reason. Yeah, well, he ends up in Colorado, and he's been in Colorado before. Oh. Yeah. He when Hulk lands the plane, he actually lands in Colorado. So he had been there, but he might have been avoiding it before this. But he did go back. But he had been in Colorado before. I think in the there was one where I forget what it's called. It's not the Dunwich Horror, but it's something like that. It's the something other horror, and it's in the Rockies again. It's like where he's in another town. So he's been in the mountain regions before, and he hadn't gone home. And for what it's worth, the guy's crisscrossing the country. It's kind of hard to avoid Colorado because 80 runs right through it. And if you're
Fair.
hitchhiking, you're going to wind up on 80 and you're going to run right through Colorado,
Huh. Well, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it all makes sense logically. But he sees on a news report, he sees his sister, and it reminds him, of everything he's left behind when he decided to be, a Hulk. Well, not decided to be
And
a
a
Hulk,
fugitive.
but decided to be a fugitive. And, and for what it's worth, it's not like he chose to be a fugitive. I mean, he sort of chooses to be a fugitive because
Right.
he feels he can't go back to the world at large. But at the same time, it's not like he's saying, "Oh, you know what? This is, it's the hobo life for me." He comes into it because this is where he has to be. Anyway,
No, it's interesting.
yes, no, please talk.
What's interesting to me about this episode is it's just so chock full of like metaphors and parallels all around. The larvae to the beetle, one being destructive, one being safe. Even sort of like the parallels between history and progress. He's going back to his history, but can they coexist with who he is?
Yeah, well, and of course you get a very big Hulk metaphor in that as well, which is the idea that the Hulk is both that in one state he's dangerous, in one state he's safe, and he's trying to find the way to get to the cure where he can be the person who is safe, and of course he needs to. But of course, what I found most fascinating about that was the idea that within it, yes, he's trying to get to that point where he can be the safe person, but of course the cure for the Beatles is he has to go from being the larva, being Banner, to metamorphosizing into their own Hulks, as it were.
Right. It's like every good time travel drama says time can, bend and shift, but it can't go backwards.
Yes, but this is what they do, and they create a thing where they create a trigger hormone for the larvae that'll make them enter into an early pubescence and become this.
Oh, and you gotta love the science jargon of TV of that era. Anti-juvenile hormone.
Yeah, well, honestly, I actually think that might be the proper terminology. I mean, it sounds...
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. Well, scientific jargon often does use a lot of superfluous modifiers, So an anti-juvenile hormone is in some way maybe a more likely term than a maturing hormone,
I just Googled it, and then there are study after study about anti-juvenile hormone agents.
See?
Wow, you're right.
Yeah, they actually do try on the science here sometimes, Mozz. Believe it or not.
Wow.
They have 1970s science, but they are working but they're working with science. It's a science show, One of the things about this show is that, the producer really didn't want it to be just a, comic book extravaganza. He wanted it to be something that had some grounding in reality. And again,
Wow.
this is why I always say that the Incredible Hulk is the protogenesis of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is this idea that if we ground everything in some reality, if we ground everything in this idea of, something that we can see and understand, something that makes sense to us, it makes all the extraordinary aspects acceptable. Because we've embraced the idea. I mean, that was in essence, the entire reason why, Stan Lee exposed everyone to radiation, or as with the X-Men, just had them be natural mutations. It was that he wanted to have an explanation that made sense. He wanted something that, or at least would make sense to the minds of the day. And then the
bridge.
Exactly, and of course, radiation causes mutations, which it does. Very rarely beneficial mutations. But then again, most of the time when he has these mutations, they're not necessarily beneficial, Banner does not see the Hulk as a beneficial mutation to his genome. He sees it as very detrimental. So and he almost always describes his condition as radiation poisoning here. And I think that is very telling about what the character is meant to feel and see and be. So, of course, we find out as the story goes on, as they keep on moving forward, we find out that the developer, who at first just seems like your average developer, just look, guy, I'm here, I'm trying to help you guys out. Your land is not worth what you think it is. You know, the crops are dying. You're having these bad seasons. You need to get out of this. I'm going to give you a nice, healthy bit of money so I can build my thing. And, you know, and he almost is trying to seem like a good guy. And we've had guys like this in these shows before, where the guy in the first scene opens up and he seems like he's just being a decent guy. He's not really a sociopathic supervillain. He's just a nice guy. But, of course, if you're really a sociopathic supervillain, you want to seem like a nice guy. You want people to trust you, you know? You want to make Gotham great again, as the Penguin did in Gotham, and as it turns out, he tried to do in the 1966 Batman too. Oh yeah, vote Penguin. It's on this week on Saturday at midnight. So if you got Me TV, look it up. Although by the time this airs, it'll be like 3 weeks ago. But yes, Penguin runs for mayor, using a crazy system of just bluster and hyperbole. And, you know, big rallies. And, of course, Batman wants to run on the issues. Oh, Batman. When will you learn? Okay. Yes. I watch the Hulk on Me TV, so I got to plug them too. It's a good channel, especially on Saturday nights when they do all the sci-fi and superhero shows. Anyway, so what we find out is that, you know, they hear that, you know, Helen is working with some geneticist and has come up with something, so they go to mess up the lab. And of course, David walks in on this and gets knocked out. And he gets knocked out a couple times in this episode. And again, it's one of these things you're like, really? That's not upsetting to you at all, David? It's no, they have knocked out David. I think
it happens so fast before the reaction takes hold. You know, he has to realize the pain before he can turn. You know,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that is what it is, and that is absolutely your explanation of it. But it is. It is interesting to me to some level in that idea that, oh yeah, you know, it's very convenient that you can knock a Hulk out, you know?
Right, exactly. For his enemies, it's a little bit of hope because the Hulk is indestructible, but you got to give him a little bit of hope, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would you fight?
Well, of course, they never know he's the Hulk until after. So anyway.
Well, that's also true.
Yeah, but they smash up the lab a bit, which apparently doesn't really set them back in any way. They knock out David, but they get about it, but they know what's going on, and then basically, you know, they steal the sample and they give it, and then we get the big reveal that this guy who seemed like just a regular old land developer in late 70s America, you know, helping out these destitute farmers who are clinging to a dying way of life, that actually he's trying to kill their way of life. That actually he had a scientist selectively breed these beetles, and they spread the beetles, and it's like this, you know, really evil thing. And it was amazing because I love the fact that the scientist is just like, oh yes, you know, it's quite brilliant what they did, quite brilliant. You know, so you promised me these would be immune to insecticide. Oh, they absolutely are. They're immune to insecticide. This isn't an insecticide. You know, this just matures them.
He's a bad guy, but he's a scientist first.
Well, yeah. Well, you know, he is a scientist, but is he even a bad guy? He's just someone pays me to create bugs. I don't know. I'm a bug guy. That's my thing. You know.
Well, that's fair.
You know, not every scientist thinks that deeply about what they're doing. They're just doing their science. You know.
Right.
At some point, you might want to breed bugs that are resistant to. Actually, there's lots of reasons why you might want to breed a bug that is resistant to certain toxins, because if you can breed them to be resistant to toxins, you learn the pathway of that resistance, and then you can anticipate that to kill bugs before they develop that resistance. So there actually is a very noble reason why a scientist might think this is a perfectly legitimate thing to do. And we also found out the crop duster's on the take. You know, which makes you wonder if they were even spraying those chemicals at all. You know, although he makes I guess you get this thing that he was always doing his job because he wants a little extra to spray the
guilt.
Yeah, the anti-maturation compound. You know, with the anti-juvenile compound. So you know, he wants that $1,000 and the job as a private pilot.
Right, yeah, he says $3,000 to sell out your friends. I mean, like, either this guy's, you know, conscience is very small, or, I mean, this was really long ago.
Yeah, well, this is 1970, so that's $3,000, 1979 money. You know, this was when comic books cost 15 cents. So, you know, that was a lot of money.
That's a lot of comics.
It is a lot of comics, you know. I mean, I don't know what the average wage was, but it was probably, you know, it wasn't $1,000 a week, is what I'm saying. Yeah, probably people were living on, you know, some amount of hundreds of dollars a month, your average person, and so getting a $3,000 windfall was probably a lot of money. You know, remember when the lotto first came out in like the early '80s, you know, and it was $1 million, and that was like, whoa, that would change your whole life forever, you know. Nowadays, $1 million, okay, well, that'll last me, you know, a couple of years. And it would last you definitely a couple of years. But no one's sitting there thinking, you know, oh, I get $1 million, I'm set for life. Well, I mean, a lot of people are, but they probably are living on, you know, $3,000, you know. So, yeah. So what it is it's a significant but not grand amount to betray his friends. He doesn't know what the actual plan is. And, of course, we find out exactly how evil our guy is, because he tells his henchmen, make sure neither him nor D.W. Banner come back. You know? Yeah. So they're not even going to pay him the $3,000.
Right. Anytime somebody comes back at you in a negotiation and wants to give you more, you walk away.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Because he says, I'll take $3,000. He goes, I'll give you $4,000.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because he wants him to feel comfortable, and, you know... Yeah. Oh, well, you know, if only he had watched this episode, he'd know.
Well, he was just a crop duster.
Yes. And, hey, that's a skilled trade, man. Don't be hating on crop dusters.
Yeah, he doesn't get to fly a plane all day. What am I talking about?
Yeah, exactly, man. It seems like he's living the dream, quite frankly.
That's true.
You know. Although, you know, I guess the problem for that is that you're living the dream, but you're also seeing another dream just ahead. Because, like the guy says, hey, it'll be better than just flying in circles over Grail Valley every day. You know. It is what it is. Anyway, so David comes in. He realizes that they've cut the line on or they've like severely worn it down so that it'll snap while they're in flight. And when he goes but then of course the thug knocks out David,
right,
and puts him off to the side, and then he calls and says, "So can I kill this guy too?" And the guy says, "Yes, go ahead, kill him too." Because you know what? Because the guy had been trying this new crazy business strategy where you don't kill people, and it just wasn't working. And he realized that's why we have tried and true business practices that they teach at Harvard Business School, saying, hey, try killing someone. That always works. So you're in for a penny, in for a pound. He's going to kill everybody. But, of course, David does wake up and sees the plane taking off and runs after it and grabs onto it. And, again, this is why I think it's not just the stress. It's not just the pain. It's the emotion. It's that here's his dad. Here's what he's, you know, this is this whole thing. And he knows his dad is in danger. And so he hulks out and everyone, you know, what's interesting here is we hear him shouting dad, but that doesn't come back later, you know. So, but I guess it is an airfield, so maybe people couldn't necessarily hear him shouting dad, but we all could hear him shouting dad.
Well, I mean, the other thing is the crop duster, the guy flying the plane, all of a sudden has, you know, like zero peripheral vision from his right side.
Yes. Well, maybe that's why he had to go into crop dusting. That's one thing that the guy didn't realize, that he hired him as as his commercial pilot, and that plane would have crashed, like, you know, 2 weeks in.
Right. No, we get a great Hulk out here on the plane, which is so awesome, and his father gets to see what the whole deal is and why he's been hiding, which was really, really cool, too.
Yeah.
And then finally we get a scene where somebody sees him change and doesn't think, hey, where did this other guy come from, you know?
Yes. Well,
they actually stuck to what the scene says, and he actually saw it and believes it now, which is cool.
And to be fair, it is his father, and so he recognizes his son.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the point there. And of course, we get basically, and again, we get this really great moment of a thinking Hulk again, where he realizes the plane is in trouble, pushes his hand through the thing to pull the cords to land the plane. You know? And that's really in its own way pretty amazing. You know, when you think about the Hulk and you think about what he's doing and the level of intellect that has to be going on underneath that Brutus exterior. You know, and you do get that here, and that is a very good thing here. We see the Hulk save the day. We see the Hulk run off. We see his dad run after him, and we get to have this nice moment. We get to see the Hulk cry.
The Hulk teared up.
Yeah.
That was intense.
Well, you know, not for nothing, the Hulk is a very passionate being. You know, I mean, that's the thing. The emotional rage is what triggers the Hulk. But the Hulk, once he's triggered, is his own being.
Right. And I almost feel like he's trapped by the emotion also. You get this sense that, you know, when Banner turns and he turns into the Hulk is free, but the Hulk is never really free. It feels like the Hulk is, you know, sort of burdened by this rage and this anger himself. And I don't think he wants it either. He wants to smell the flowers and you know, feel the sun or whatever, but he doesn't get to, which is really sad.
Well, you know, there is this classic line from the Hulk, which is Hulk want be left alone. You know, because the Hulk always Hulk's always in the, and they'd often open up and Hulk's in the desert and he's like playing with a bunny or sniffing a flower or just relaxing, and all of a sudden here comes General Ross and the tanks shooting at him, and he goes, Hulk want be left alone, and smashes tanks and everything and jumps away. And you know, but that's a recurring theme, that the Hulk in many ways wants to get away from people because he doesn't want to hurt people. And really, it's Banner who always brings him back to people. You know, the Hulk wants to get away. It's like, dude, I'm dangerous, okay? Let me just go be somewhere by myself. And
who's really a detriment to who at this point, really?
Well, that's something to get into the whole Planet Hulk and Aftermath stories. Is like who was the actual real threat? You know, did Hulk try to save the world from Banner, or was the Hulk always saving the world from Banner? You know. That you know, that the Hulk was what kept Banner, who is in the comic books the man who built the gamma bomb, a man who just unquestionably built a weapon of just the greatest, most destructive weapon ever. Just built that for the government, didn't care. And the Hulk is the one who keeps him from doing stuff like this. This is something they've explored later. This wasn't originally. He was just a patriotic scientist building bombs for the government to beat the commies. But, you know...
Wow, that just blew my mind.
Yeah, but with the perspective of time, that's how they look at it now, is that, you know, that maybe Banner is the sociopath. Maybe Hulk's actually the decent person. Because Hulk just wants to be left alone.
Yeah, I'm beginning to subscribe more to that theory, really.
Yes. So, but the day is saved. The chemical did get spread, I guess, somehow. I don't know if they ever actually showed them spreading the chemical, but we jump ahead and things are okay because it's Thanksgiving,
right?
And of course, Jack McGee's at the Banner House. He says, it's awfully coincidental that I first started following this Hulk, interviewing the scientist, who, as it turns out, is your son. I said, well, we haven't seen David in years, you know. It was a cute bit, but they have Jack stay for Thanksgiving dinner. You know, they say,
as much as he might not have wanted to admit it, that was nice for him because he seems like a guy who's always running around chasing the Hulk, and he doesn't really have time for himself or for reflection or anything like that. And he gets that moment, and I think he really is great for it.
Yeah, well, because he doesn't have a family. I mean, Jack McGee doesn't. I mean, he's a reporter. He's this gumshoe reporter who is working for this paper that nobody respects, but that he knows he can do good with, and, for what it's worth, it's a national paper at a time when there weren't a lot of national papers. His stories got read all across the country. This was before USA Today. The USA Today was the first real legitimate news source that tried to be a national paper. And the National Register was a national paper. If you wrote for them, your stories got read, even if you had to be next to the story about UFOs. And, of course, as I've always said, what is intriguing to Jack McGee about the Hulk isn't just that it's a Hulk and it sells paper, but that it's a real story. This is real. This is not stuff that's, just to sell paper. There's this real giant monster out there that I'm chasing. And this legitimizes everything else about the National Register. So, but he gets to sit at David's spot, which is, you can take your thoughts about whether that's insulting or delightful. But David has to be back on the road because Jack McGee's there. And it's very sweet. It's very sweet because we saved the farm. Got to save the farm. And
he didn't get to save his mom, but he got to save his farm.
Yeah, he got to say. Well, he got to make peace with his father, which is, really, that's what he wanted to do from the start. He wanted to make peace with his father. He wanted to have the relationship be better, and now it was. And although I'm sure we never come back to Grail Valley, they know he's out there. He knows they're there. And if ever danger arises again, the Hulk will be there for them. Although, because we don't revisit the story, it never arises again.
Right.
But it's nice to know that, things continued. And it was a great way to wrap up Thanksgiving. Me and Mozz we're recording this week, Thanksgiving week. We're on Tuesday. Thanksgiving is Thursday. And I'm sure we're all going to celebrate all the things there are still to be thankful for in this great land. Until January 20th. Okay, Mozz, if people wanted to reach out to you, talk to you about how much they love the Hulk, how much they love you on the Hulk, where can they reach out to you?
Oh, they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com. That's MOZZMANZOOR@gmail.com.
Beautiful. And, of course, if you want to write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way someone in 1979 might have done on the LARPnet or the ARPANET or whatever it was called, you can write to me at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, you can follow me on the Twitters, as the fancy kids are doing nowadays, at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hulking out with us tonight. Hulk out with us again next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.
There we go. Okay.
I'm loving that new opening. That's awesome.
Yeah, I like it too. I was just spur of the moment thing. I thought, let's do my Hulk roar. I did it like on the very first episode. I did a Hulk roar, and I haven't done it since. Now I'm doing it again because now it's my show. Dang it!
Oh, I love it. I think it's awesome.
Okay, we'll keep the Hulk roar.
The one thing that I think I missed from this episode was every time the Hulk hulks out, my favorite part is him stepping out of his shoes. That is just the silliest thing ever. And in the first Hulk out, he's in bed, so he's not wearing shoes, so I didn't get to have that. And then, as he's driving to the farm to spray, he's got his boots on, and he puts them up on the dashboard. I'm like, oh, they're teasing me with the hulking out of the boots. But we never got that, so that was a little disappointing.
Yeah, that is a little disappointing. Yeah, normally we get that nice, the shoes popping and all that stuff. But, that kind of stuff. It might be harder to shoot, and they got time, and maybe there's a director's cut out there somewhere where you can get the shoe popping, or they just forgot to film it that day. Because man, when you're trying to shoot all these different things, you miss stuff. It happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, Mozz, thank you for doing this. We will hop again next week on Sunday at 3. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan. Can't wait.
We'll do Cage and Gamma. Sounds great. Perfect.
Indeed.
Good night, Mozz. Take care.
All right, man. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.